but wanted to talk about something that's going to be we're doing next week. So several folks, who's going with Professor Spees to the island in tomorrow or whatever it is? Okay, so a third-ish of you, something like that, are going to be going with him, right? And you guys don't come back till late Monday night, basically, right? So so wanted to give you guys I wanted to do sort of the general intro to next week's activity, so that you guys could have a sense of what's going on, because since a lot of you guys won't be here, won't be able to look at it ahead of time and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so what again, this is not today, but this will be for, due 2 Fridays from now. So just the data visualization is going to be to play around with some of our Reef Check data. And so wanted to explain to you guys what Reef Check was or is, and Professor Spees can chime in here and correct me. So this is a citizen science effort. So this is not PhDs or necessarily classes, although sometimes classes and some of us use this data, but this is regular divers. So one, we want to put a plug for anybody that's interested in diving. Professor Spees, I started our careers mostly, underwater diving in water, all that kind of stuff. It's a fantastic opportunity for you guys. We have a special relationship for anybody that's going to do diving as part of anything that's federally funded. And in fact, most state agencies also follow this guidance. And in fact, most zoos and aquaria follow this guidance. And this basically is, if you want to go scuba diving, you have to get what's called Open Water 1 certified. So you get essentially go to a dive shop and you get trained to how to safely operate compressed gases and do all that kind of cool stuff underwater, swim around, see fish, see kelp, all that kind of good stuff. And then we have an additional level of training through a third party called the American Academy of Underwater Sciences. They're not at universities, they're not the government, they're an independent third party, and they've created a safety standard for how we do research, science-related diving, and they make sure everybody's up to snuff. So our organizations are accredited by that organization. And then once you're accredited, once you're in the door, you have the keys to the realm. So then you can go to Hawaii, dive with the University of Hawaii, you can go to Florida, you can go to Michigan, can go wherever else, and they just send a letter on. So it's our way of making sure everybody's safe. And essentially what you do is you just go through another class that you have already gone through at the dive shop, but now it's with academics and professionals that are very safety oriented. And so that's important because you can only get that accreditation through an AAUS program. So whereas the dive shop, we can go in Santa Barbara, we can go in Lake Tahoe, we can go wherever and get, Cancun and get certified. You can only get certified through a university or a university affiliate. So it's harder to get. If you guys have any interest underwater, we encourage you guys to get your Open Water 1, your general stuff from a dive shop, and then come with us. Okay. So Reef Check was created because to do what I just described, one of the reasons it's a great thing for you guys to think about if you're interested in marine or coastal stuff is because almost nobody has this. So if you have an AAUS certification, you're automatically at the top of the job pile, right? So if the Channel Islands National Park is looking for divers for their monitoring program, Monterey Bay Aquarium, wherever it is, I'm accredited. And the vast majority, like 99.99% of people are not. So it's a really useful thing. And you guys can talk to either of us if you're interested in that. This was created because for us to do our monitoring, we have to have everybody trained this way. And so the idea was, hey, what if we want to understand how our reefs are doing, but, not everybody's a PhD, not everybody's going to go to school for all these years and whatever. So this was created as a citizen science project for people that are scuba divers and want to contribute, want to understand fish, want to help people do their part to say if the reef is healthy or not healthy. And so that's what this guy is. And so while the scientists and professionals use this data, it's collected primarily by non-scientists and non-quote-unquote professionals. And so that's where we get the term citizen science. And then the other great thing is we can involve, again, because we have a limited pool of the quote-unquote professionals, this opens the door to a lot more people and therefore a lot more sites, a lot more areas to be monitored. And so this starts with Education. So if you want to engage in this program, you first go to some orientation seminars and people explain what the program is, etc. And then people actually go out and do stuff, and they support research, and they're trained, and they're verified. So just like if you wanted to go help with a bird monitoring project, they would kind of give you the overview, and then you go out with the person or the trainer or whatever and just confirm. When you say American crow, you know that that's a crow and not a raven or whatever the issue is. Same thing here. So this started in our old department at UCLA in 1998. And one of the first fantastic one of my undergrads was one of the people that was helping start this. She unfortunately was killed in this horrible accident in the Coral Triangle, and was unclear if we were going to continue with the program, but it did continue, and it's now become quite strong, so it's great. So this began with coral reefs. So this began with a focus on mostly tropical areas and people counting the type of coral, the type of fish that are on the reef, etc. And then in the 2000s, we spread it to California. And again, because it's not just randos, not just some one person's interested, you have to go through this training. We had to develop very specific programs for how to do this and very, very clear manuals. And whereas Professor Spies and I know a lot of different algae and a lot of different fish and whatever, that's not this, right? We're not doing everything under the sun. We have targeted categories of things. So we don't need everybody that wants to do this to learn every single fish that's out in the ocean, right? It's like, hey, these are for this community, these are the fish we want you to target, which is why it started on tropical reefs, but our Reef Check California, which is the data you guys are going to play with, we had to develop our own things, and we had to decide who was going to be in, who was not going to be in, etc. Okay. So this is, I should say, if I didn't say this is a nonprofit that does. So Reef Check is a nonprofit organization. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, so they're not paid, they're not compensated. And so all their training, they're paying, I mean, they're not paying to train, but you know, they're going to pay for their own air fills, and if it's a boat ride out, they're going to pay for the boat trip out and whatever. And then when they're already out there, it's like, let's help, right? So they might spend most of their day doing fun dives. They might take 2 dives and do some data collection, right? So it's just like you guys might be interested in volunteering for a project. You might go on vacation, volunteer, whatever. And that Joe Blow could just go on vacation. You guys are like, hey, I'm interested in this. I want to do a volunteer thing. So same kind of idea. And a lot of this was based on, we had a group out at Catalina that started, that's even older than this, that started at Catalina around our research station and stuff, and that was sort of one of the major impetuses. Okay, so
I'll add real quick.
Yeah.
That so when you get a AAUS certified, you have to, in order to maintain your active status, you have to have a certain amount of dives every year, and so a lot of the divers here use this as a way to keep up their dives, right? Because if you're not on an active research project, or you don't have a job that's, you could have a job working for Fish and Wildlife, and maybe you get out once or twice a year, you have your 4 dives or something like that. So you do get a lot of scientists in here, that not as many as the general like volunteers, but a lot of scientists in our field. I'm actually going to probably start doing it because I don't have any active projects to keep me diving. So
Yet.
But it gets you out, and it gets you in this really awesome community, but then it keeps your active status going. And it's 12. You have to have 12 dives a year.
In the AAUS program.
In the AAUS world. So they have to. So if I go lobster diving, that's not considered one, unless I'm doing some kind of research on the lobsters while I'm down there, right?
This tastes better with butter.
But so 12 dives might not sound like a lot, but it's a lot, right? Because you really are limited every time you go out. You can maybe squeeze a 3rd dive, but that's like a full day of diving. So usually you get 1 to 2. So you really do have to have these opportunities to keep up your status.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so Reef Check. Okay, so now these guys could just go out and do whatever they want. You could go out and any data would be helpful, right? Hey, is Ventura healthy? Is Malibu healthy? Is Oxnard healthy? Is Carpinteria healthy? Right? That would be better than not knowing. But this was coming up right when our overhaul of our marine protected areas were starting up, and you guys should take coastal management if you haven't taken that yet. But this is right when this network of protected areas was. We had a network before, but it was being overhauled. And so, as with all of our stuff, everybody wants to pay for the sexy painting or the sexy renovation of the wing. Nobody wants to pay for the janitors. Nobody wants to pay for the day in, day out, the sort of, not exactly boring, but the sort of mundane daily tasks. And so while it's hard to establish a park or a protected area, there's sort of some ways to do that. But then when it's like checking the park, is the park healthy? Is the park sick? Is it whatever? Like nobody wants to pay for that. And so all of the energy, there's a whole long story with this, but the short version is all the energy when we were going to establish the protected areas, that just took just getting them going was a monumental task. And then the answer was, how are we going to know if these marine protected areas are helping our fish, our kelp, our invertebrates, or whatever? And the answer was, we'll monitor it. And that was all the planning, right? So once they're established, everybody's like, woo, we got this great new world-class network of necklaces up and down the coast. What are we gonna do? And nobody had any idea. So Reef Check was one of the entities that has stepped in, and that is pretty much statewide is probably the most robust data set we have to say, are there more fish here than there were before? Are there bigger fish here than there was before? That kind of stuff, okay? So that's what this is. So all these things, theoretically, we could use this data set since we standardized it, right? We're not doing every single thing. We've picked focal algae, focal invertebrates, focal fish. And so then we know everybody in our region is trained on those fish. Cool. Now we have a yardstick. And so we measured it this year, and we measured it next year, and we measured it the year after. So now we can start to have an apples to apples comparison of what's going on. And because this is volunteers, sometimes these guys have gotten money from different projects or different funding sources to kind of maybe analyze the data or clean it up. But the day in, day out stuff is never paid for or very rarely paid for. And so therefore, it means it's relatively sustainable, right? So as long as we have a big cadre of you all or the general public who's interested, we can keep this going. And so this is not a panacea. It's not perfect because if there aren't people that show up on one day, maybe we don't have data. But in the long term, it's been our most consistent data set to ask what's going on with stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who is, if you were to ask for the funding, who's giving the funding for that, like for the daily?
Let's see. So, so there isn't day-to-day maintenance, but as far as the nonprofit, it's a nonprofit. So just like an other environmental group, they take donations. So some people make donations, and then other people that have funded them have been at times different units of the state of California. A program called Sea Grant, which is a federal program that's given to each state. Each coastal state gets some Sea Grant money, and then each state decides what its priorities are. So in some cases, that entity has funneled funding. Give these guys, I don't know, $200,000 for 2 years to hire a staff person to help them collate and do some analysis of the data, that kind of stuff.
Who's running Reef Check right now?
It's the nonprofit. So there's both Reef Check, which is the mother organization, which services all around the planet, coral reefs, and then there's also Reef Check California. So all that is administratively inside the thing of Reef Check, but we do have a subunit for Reef Check California. I think there's like 3 people or something, 2 people, something like that, and then a lot of interns, like sort of volunteer help. Okay, cool. So yeah, so they do all this stuff, and if you guys are interested, you guys can go to Reef Check website and check it out. Again, they require that you are a scuba diver, but if you guys are a scuba diver, you can go there and you can sign up for the next training and go on training and get certified. And then they have a frequent not recertifications, but it is a recertification, but it's really just checking to make sure everybody's calling a sheephead, that kind of stuff. Okay, all these different groups help out with it. So now we have, a pretty long data set of stuff, right? And so it's a lot of work. And so that training is I mentioned there's a few staff and there's some staff that help out, but it's a lot of volunteers. So it's just a lot of passionate volunteer people that are interested in this. It's a great way to help out. What's that? It's not. This is not my presentation. It is a pie chart. This is not my presentation. That's why I skipped over the slide and did not talk about the data. Okay, so this is all the potential areas where we could be working. I have another one I can show you, another report where actually really it's much more focused in this, but potentially we could be doing all this kind of stuff. But I'll just note that in general, we've broken most of our organization up into the Southern California region, the Central California region, which for this is basically Point Conception to essentially the San Francisco Bay Area, and then the northern reach of the state. There's some greater divisions in terms of the MPA world, but for Reef Check, those are the three main regions where they organize their stuff. And there's all kinds of reports that come out of this, but this is the kind of flavor of data you can get. And so this is the kind of stuff we're going to ask you guys to start to play with. So in this case, we have a year, and again, this is not my presentation. This is from a presentation to some legislature from a couple years ago. But in this case, we're talking about the density of critters, right? So this is exactly what we want to know. Yes, there's some noise. If we look at this red guy, which is what, the northern area. So there's like some up down. Okay, cool. So how real is that? When these guys are seeing 1.5 critters versus 2.5 critters per square meter. Is that real or not? Well, I need to sort of get a sense of what the variation is. But it certainly appears different from purple and green, right? So because the data is such that we don't always have every single site every single year, it's maybe not the highest resolution on every single site up and down the coast, but it's great for what we call synoptic or looking at the whole coast at the same time, right? Nobody's going to have money to fund a project where we send everybody out at the same exact day or the same month or whatever up and down the coast, but using citizen science, you can get at that. So essentially, we're going to give you guys some data, and you guys will just sort of play around and start to look for patterns. And so we have the data, and so we're going to give you guys the opportunity to decide what you want to do. But I'll just say the data, you could choose a couple broad categories. One is the types of things there are. So for example, one might be cover. So the percent cover of coral and algae or something like that, right? There's also counts, the number of individuals. So it could be a proportional measure, the percentage, or it could be the total number of things. And it could be, you could choose to do kelp cover, or algal cover, or fish abundance, right? Which is how many fish do we have? Or you can break it down into the different groups. In this case, this is these are urchins, which are one of the invertebrates that are surveyed for. And so you could sort of say, hey, how do the MPA sites compare to the non-MPA sites? Or how have the sites in Southern California, how have the abundance of urchins changed over time, for example? And yeah, okay, I'll just say that. And you can do all kinds of different stuff and slice and dice it and whatever. Now, normally, what my original intention for this was to have you guys go and query the data set and suck the data down. Okay, so that I like, that's sort of a useful skill. Unfortunately, the database is being maintained right now, so I had to email them, and they emailed us the data. So instead of you guys doing the query, which is this online tool, and essentially, and if this is of interest to you guys, not right now, but probably in a few weeks or a month or so when it's back up, anybody can have access. So you just need to email them, set up a free account, takes a couple hours for them to approve it, and then they say, why do you want it? And you just say, I want to do it, and they'll say, okay, you need to acknowledge Reef Check and any products you make from this, and you're like, okay, cool, and then you could do the querying. But because of the particular maintenance going on right now, we just did the queries for you. So I'll have some CSVs for you that they provided to us for you guys to play with. Cool? Okay, so that's the basic idea. And the basic idea is going to be for you guys to look for patterns. Tell us some stories, right? So the two main ones are going to be the change over time, and then sort of just general change over time. And the other big category is going to be inside a marine protected area versus outside a marine protected area. The change over time is going to be, hey, do we see a change of our organism, A or B? Yes, it is. No, it doesn't. Or do marine protected areas, which reduce exploitation harvest. So in areas where we don't harvest a lot of fish, do we see more fish? Or maybe we do, maybe we don't. So those would be the two main things once we flick everything on for you guys. Make sense? So Reef Check California, you guys are welcome to go check out their website, explore stuff. I think I was going to show another few graphs, but I think that's the main idea. Anybody have any questions for us or for me?